There we go. Well, thank you very much for inviting me, and thanks for taking the time to let me tell you about this book. Let me first share my screen. Easier said than done. There. So, um, so this book is a book about the Jewish people. It starts with the observation that for the first time in Jewish history, the Jewish nation today is split evenly in only two locations, Israel and America, roughly 7 million, 7 million. And so the book identifies the sociological, cultural, and political differences between these two Jewish tribes. And it points out that in the past 40 years, these differences have produced ongoing and growing tensions and hurt feelings on both sides. The tension point that's most visible to outsiders is that American Jews have become increasingly ambivalent in their support for Israel. Now, most American Jews support Israel. I was going to say wholeheartedly, but the issue is I'm pointing out is that there's a problem with American Jews' support for Israel. Not a problem. It has a limit. Okay? So most American Jews support Israel, but it's become increasingly a source of discomfort for them. Israel and Israelis embarrass them in their social circles, and they find themselves having to explain and make excuses for Israel. And this is why you can see that American Jews offer Israel tons of financial support, but are more muted in their political support. There's a lot of support in private with opposite a computer screen, but only measured support in public, on the street, in the press, in Congress, etc. Yes, you compare the useful comparison is for how American Jews support Israel is when you look at how Arab Americans and Muslim Americans support the Palestinians online and on television and on the street and on Facebook, etc. But the book is not pessimistic. So the book is not just about this. It follows these. It traces the different the cultural differences, political differences, sociological differences between these Jews and these Jews, and it touches on also the tensions and hurt feelings that emerge because of the way they interact. But like I said, the book is not pessimistic. My co-author and I, we think the tensions and hurt feelings between these two Jewish groups, these two Jewish quote unquote tribes, are just a phase, and I'll explain why. And it's not because the spirit of unity and love will heal the rift, but because of certain demographic trends that American Jews are undergoing. So that's what the book is about. And if you want more information, I'm going to leave a link in the chat. So what I want to do today is to evaluate and to dispel the conventional explanation for the shift among American Jews, the shift that they've undergone from full unapologetic support for Israel in the early decades of Israel's existence to an uncomfortable ambivalence about Israel in the last few decades. And surveys show this again and again, that among non-Orthodox American Jews, which is roughly 90% of American Jews, so the Orthodox community accounts for about 10%, everybody else these polls apply to. Among non-Orthodox American Jews, support for Israel declines. The younger you are, the more left-wing you are, and the more irreligious you are. Now, most American Jews and most Israelis too attribute this shift to changes that Israel has undergone during these last few decades. They primarily point to Israel's transformation from the 90-pound weakling of the Middle East to the neighborhood tough guy since the 6 Days War in 1967. The argument is that when little Israel stood heroically against the mighty Arab coalition that sought to destroy it, like little David against Goliath, it enjoyed a positive public image in the world. But when it won those wars, conquered its neighbors' lands, governed the Arab inhabitants in these territories, and became economically prosperous, its public perception changed, and it started to be perceived as Goliath rather than David. Now, the problem with in the image here, you can see the conquests that Israel made in these in the 6 Days War in 67 and the Yom Kippur War in 73. Now, the problem with this explanation is that Israel's public image started to suffer in the West only in the 1980s and 90s. Now, Israel, like I said, Israel defeated its neighbors in 1967 and again in 1973 and governed the conquered Palestinian inhabitants of Judea and Samaria and Gaza ever since then. And it was recognized as the strongest power in the region, again, ever since those two wars, without losing public sympathy among Americans and definitely not among American Jews. Not until the late 1780s or so, mid maybe 1780s, 1980s, sorry. Okay, so the conquest and governing the Palestinian population in Gaza, Judea, and Samaria, and being kind of the neighborhood tough guy, that happened in the late 60s, early 70s. But the public image slide only happened in the late 80s and 90s. Now, another explanation is that American Jews are turned off. Again, an explanation for why this shift, this slide in public approval for Israel among American Jews. So this other explanation is that American Jews are turned off by the fact that Israeli religious authorities do not recognize Reform conversions, don't give Reform rabbis seats on Israel's rabbinical councils, and don't accommodate Reform worship practices at places like the Western Wall. And when I say that, I mean I'm referring to American Jews' demand that men and women be allowed to pray together at the wall, which goes against a basic tenet of Orthodox Judaism, which is what prevails in Israel. The problem with this explanation for this PR slide is that Israel never recognized Reform conversions, never gave the Reform movement seats on Israel's rabbinical councils, and never accommodated Reform worship. And in fact, Israel is more accommodating to the Reform movement today than it ever was. For example, at the Western Wall. So it's definitely not a hardening of Israeli policy regarding Reform Judaism that's triggered American Jews' problem with Israel. In fact, as Israel has made some token accommodations, the discomfort or ambivalence of American Jews with Israel has actually grown deeper. Because what's causing this distance or alienation from Israel is not a product of changes in Israel, but changes in America among American Jews. Okay? This distancing is happening not because Israel is changing, or has changed, but because American Jews have changed. And I'll break these changes down into two categories. changes that were taking place are taking place on the American left generally, which is home to roughly 80% of American Jews, and changes taking place among Jews specifically, non-Orthodox Jews. The first change, the one taking place in the American and European left, is a growing fear and disdain towards nationalism and religion. In the early 20th century, Americans on both the left and right saw nationalism and religion as good things, which advance freedom, democracy, and just general decency. But by the late 20th century, larger numbers of Americans of Democrats, Americans on the left, which includes the vast majority of American Jews, have come to see nationalism and religion negatively as vehicles of bigotry, chauvinism, colonialism, xenophobia, racism, and a few others. And the problem for Israel in this respect is that Israel combines these two boogeymen of left-wing mentality, in the sense that Israel is unapologetic about allowing religion a prominent role in public life, and it is unapologetically nationalist, ethno-nationalist. Okay, that's the worst kind. So for those who are offended by nationalism and see nationalism as a malignant force in society, and are particularly afraid of the interaction of nationalism and religion, for them, they correctly identify Jewish nationalism as exactly what they find so distasteful and threatening. Jewish nationalism is the oldest and best documented form of nationalism in the Western world. And the Jewish religion has been an integral part of Jewish nationhood since antiquity. So this is the change taking place on the American left, and therefore also on the Jewish left. So like I said, the American left is home to roughly 75–80% of American Jews. In the sense that back when left-wingers saw nationalism and religion as forces for good, they liked seeing these forces at play in Israel. But as they began to disdain and fear nationalism and religion, they've begun to see Israel as problematic and distasteful, perhaps even a bad actor in the region, like the neighborhood bully, if you remember Bob Dylan's song. But those poor Israelis, especially those on the Israeli left, they believe that Israel's PR problems in America and in Europe, on the left, are products of Israel's strong army and the occupation, etc. Okay. So the state of Israel continuously tries to remind the American left and European left that despite its strong army, Israel is still the David character in this storyline. It's still under attack, still vulnerable, still left-leaning, and thus still worthy of global sympathy. So Israelis wind up you'll notice if you follow Israeli public relations efforts, you'll see them explaining day and night that they're not the aggressors in the Arab-Israeli conflict, that Israel's borders have fences on the Israeli side of the border to prevent Arab invasions, not the other way around, because the Arabs don't fear Israeli invasion. They explain that Israel's military actions are retaliatory or preventive, and they remind everyone that when the American and European left demanded withdrawals, Israeli withdrawals, Israel withdrew from Arab territory in Egypt, in Lebanon, in Gaza, and in parts of Judea and Samaria, and that these withdrawals were rewarded with rocket attacks and terrorist attacks that killed roughly 3,000 Jews and wounded more than 10,000. Moreover, Israel also publicizes its commitment to democracy and to European-style social policies on gay rights and women's rights, maternity benefits, generous welfare payments, minority rights, free press, green energy, recycling, public transportation, reforestation, etc. And they do all this because of this mistaken belief that Israel can address its PR problems by being sufficiently accommodating to the American left in its foreign policy with the Arabs and in its domestic policies. When in fact, Israel's PR problems on the left stem not from what Israel does, but from what Israel is. It's a state that combines religion and ethnic nationalism, both of which the American left, including the Jewish left, has come to see as benighted, retrograde, embarrassing, and even threatening. For those people who view the nation state as an outdated construct that should be replaced by multicultural democracies in which global governance drives national and religious identity from the public square into the private sphere, Israel, as a Jewish nation state, is problematic and even to some degree offensive. And this is true not just for the American left, it's also true for the Israeli left. Okay? In Tel Aviv is like the San Francisco of Israel. The city continually fights against Jewish prayers in public. In 2023, left-wing groups forcefully broke up Yom Kippur public prayer meetings in Tel Aviv and in other cities as well. And in 2024, the city outlawed public praying for Jews. Okay? Muslims naturally can still pray in public. So there's a problem with the Jewish religion in public, practice in public in the Jewish state. The Israeli left also has worked for decades to decouple Jewish nationhood from the state of Israel, to make Israel a state without an ethnic or nationalist or religious component. Okay, so it's simply a feature of the modern left and the modern left in Europe, in America, and in Israel. And as long as it is there, this fear and disdain of religion and nationalism, the left will find Israel problematic. Again, because of what Israel is, not because of what it does. So the first change that affects how American Jews relate to Israel is a change taking place on the left generally. The second change is a change taking place among American Jews specifically, and that is the ongoing weakness of Jewish identity. American Jews score lowest among all diaspora communities on each of the things we all associate with Jewish identity. Do you self-identify as Jewish? Do you raise your children in the Jewish faith? Marrying within the faith, belonging to Jewish organizations, supporting Jewish causes and charities, belonging to a Jewish community, attending synagogue regularly or occasionally, enrolling your children in Jewish day schools, knowing Hebrew, visiting Israel, feeling some sort of attachment, emotional connection to the Jewish state. by any metric that we associate Jewish identity, a Jewish identity, American Jews score lowest among all Jewish diaspora communities on each and every one of them. Okay, so although American Jewry is by far the largest and strongest Jewish diaspora, it is the least effective in fostering a sense of Jewish identity and community and a commitment to living a Jewish life year-round rather than just on the high holy days. So by any of these communal metrics, the American Jewish community is fraying. Another sign of this fraying is demographic stagnation. With the exception of the 10% who are Orthodox, the American Jewish community is aging rapidly because it suffers from extremely low birth rates and extremely high intermarriage rates. Roughly 75% of non-Orthodox marriages are with non-Jews. Non-Orthodox couples marry late, have few children, 1.4 on average, and 80% of these couples do not raise their children exclusively in the Jewish faith. So no surprise then that only 60% of the children produced in these marriages identify as Jews later in life, and only 25% of the grandchildren, and forget about the great-grandchildren, which means that there are few young Jews joining the tribe, so the median age of Jews climbs higher and higher. Now, the disconnection from Judaism and from the Jewish community goes deeper still. Less than 1/3 of American Jews, and again, I'm talking only about the 90% who are not Orthodox, less than 1/3 of American Jews have a mostly Jewish circle of friends. And over 1/5 have no Jewish friends at all, which also explains why the intermarriage rate is so high. So in all aspects of life, you see this weakening of Jewish identity, decade by decade, generation by generation. American Jews socialize primarily with non-Jews. They volunteer primarily in non-Jewish organizations and contribute primarily to non-Jewish charities. They form families primarily with non-Jews and produce primarily non-Jewish grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So what this shows is that Jewish Americans have increasingly become simply Americans. The American melting pot is working perfectly, and the effect is that the Jewish component of Jews' identity has been dissolving, just as the Jewish component in their families has been dissolving as they marry into non-Jewish families and produce children with an even weaker Jewish identity. So each new generation is less likely than their parents to identify as Jewish, belong to a Jewish community, live a Jewish life, have Jewish friends, marry a Jew, raise Jewish children, feel a strong connection to the Jewish people, or support Jewish causes. One of these Jewish causes is the Jewish state. And you can see this in the fact in American Jews, you can see this weakening connection to the Jewish people in the fact that American Jews manifest a disinterest and ignorance and sentimental disconnection, not just from the state of Israel, but also from other Jewish diasporas. So it's more evidence that's what's producing the growing distance between American Jews and Israel is not changes in Israel or things that Israel does, but changes in American Jewry. Okay? To the degree that younger American Jews are more alienated from Israel than in previous generations, it's because they're more alienated from Judaism, more alienated from their own Jewish identity. 120 years ago, Theodor Herzl um, explained that Zionism is first and foremost a return to Judaism, a return to Jewishness, even before it is a return to Israel, a return to Zion. The same is true in reverse. Jews' rejection of Judaism is first and foremost a rejection of, Jews' rejection of Zionism is first and foremost a rejection of Judaism, even before it is a rejection of Israel. Now, I need to clarify that this alienation between the two Jewish entities, these two Jewish tribes in Israel and America, is not one-sided. Israeli Jews, too, show little interest or knowledge about American Jews' religious, cultural, and intellectual life and experiences. Israelis' traditional gratitude towards American Jewry and their admiration for American Jews' success and influence in America is increasingly giving way, or has increasingly given way, to expressions of resentment and disdain. Many even ridicule American Jews as naive, or at times even foolish, for their attachment to the progressive left. And so, but again, well, that's a more recent feature, maybe in the last decade or so. But my point is that to the degree that Israelis show interest in Jewish life in the United States, it mostly concerns the level of American Jews' support for Israel. So both Israeli and American Jews have grown increasingly inward-looking, focused on solving their own domestic concerns, and showing little familiarity, little understanding, and little empathy towards the other, which is completely understandable, because these Jews and those Jews live very different lives, have very different concerns, different fears, and different sensibilities, and different sociologies. As a majority in a sovereign Jewish state, Israeli Jews skew towards the political right. They have a strong Jewish identity. They embrace Jewish nationalism without question and accept the role of religion in public life. By contrast, American Jews live as a small minority in a Christian society and identify with the secular left. They exhibit a weakening Jewish identity. They disdain nationalism, and they fear religion in public life. So what you have here are two communities or two tribes on opposite paths. Israel and America are home to two Jewish populations on opposite trajectories with regard to Judaism. Israeli Jews are deepening their connection to Judaism. In Israel, they're surrounded by Jewish communities, folklore, culture, history, and religion. They speak the language of the Bible. They use the ancient Jewish calendar. They give their children biblical names and are surrounded by countless archaeological sites that ground their national life in a bedrock of Jewish history in the Holy Land, dating back to the 12 tribes of Israel. Israelis are encircled by Jewish colleagues, neighbors, friends, and family, and they engage intensely with Jewish organizations and Jewish causes. Naturally, therefore, since that's all they're surrounded by, they marry Jewish spouses and thus produce generations of offspring with a strong Jewish identity. Moreover, the ongoing security concern or threats that Israeli Jews face further intensify their sense of common Jewish identity and destiny. And this stronger Jewish identity is more pronounced or more evident among younger Israelis, who therefore increasingly find their home on the political right. By contrast, American Jews are experiencing a excuse me, experiencing a generational identity crisis as they integrate and dissolve into American society at an unprecedented rate. The United States is a uniquely open and accepting society that invites Jews to join it as regular Americans. Jews are encircled by non-Jewish colleagues and neighbors and friends and family, and they engage intensely with non-Jewish organizations and non-Jewish causes. Jews are welcomed into the highest circles of society to a degree unprecedented in Jewish history. And in return, most American Jews prioritize their identity as Americans over their Jewish identity. American Jews, actually here, there. American Jews embody the promise of the American dream in this respect, but they're leaving Judaism behind with high rates of both secularism and intermarriage. And so American Jewry is producing generations of offspring whose Jewish identity is increasingly marginal to non-existent, but as measured by all those parameters I listed before. Every generation has a greater percentage of Jews with no Jewish childhood memories and no sentimental affinity and solidarity with fellow Jews in America, fellow Jews abroad, and fellow Jews in Israel. So it sounds bad, but I urge people not to be pessimistic about this, because there's good reason to believe that the tension and alienation between American Jews and Israeli Jews are a passing phase, and that the relationship will improve in the coming generations. Again, not because love will conquer all and just heal all these divisions, but because of demographics and because of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is revealing to both Jewish tribes, as it has throughout history, that despite their different circumstances, their problems and their fates are in fact linked. The October 7th attack in Israel left 1,200 Israelis dead and 250 more kidnapped. But it also ignited a wave of anti-Semitism in American cities and elite universities that left Jews shaken and bewildered about their place in American society. This wave of anti-Semitism clarified to American Jews that they cannot escape the connection to Israel, because the attack against Zionism inevitably includes them. Distancing themselves from Zionism and from Israel and from the Jewish community and from their own Jewish identity cannot shield American Jews from anti-Semitism, because non-Jews, friends and foes alike, non-Jews see all Jews as one people, one family. The anti-Semitic protesters on America's city streets and college campuses made Jews who had not lived Jewish lives in decades come face to face with their Jewish identity in the way that they never have before. And the wave of anti-Semitism in the West clarified to Israeli Jews too that they cannot escape their fate in Israel by relocating to Europe or America. They too cannot escape anti-Semitism by distancing themselves from Israel. The anti-Semitic murder and mutilation spree in Israel and the anti-Semitic celebrations of it in America and Europe revealed to both Jewish tribes that despite their differences, they have a shared identity and a shared fate. So as always, it is Gentiles in the Middle East, in Europe, and in America who remind Jews that they're brothers. And they have no one but fellow Jews to stand with them and fight for them and with them. Certainly, Jews have friends and supporters in the Democratic mainstream, in the Republican Party, and on the Christian right. But no one is in the proverbial boat with Jews other than fellow Jews. Okay, so a new generation of Jews is thus relearning once again that nobody will defend them or avenge them, and that Jews can count only on Jews to do that. Israelis are relearning that the United Nations the United Nations peacekeepers will not protect them from Hezbollah and Hamas. The Palestinian Authority will not protect them from Palestinian terrorists. The Red Cross will not protect their hostages, and the United States will not protect them from Iran. And American Jews, likewise, have been relearning the same lesson. Big city mayors and police chiefs will not protect their Jewish residents. University presidents will not protect their Jewish students, and women's organizations will not speak for Jewish rape victims. So Jews' renewed sense of physical vulnerability and political isolation in both Israel and America has intensified the sense of family among Israeli and American Jews. Israeli Jews saw that in their darkest hour, American Jews put aside complaints and hurt feelings and rallied to their aid. At no time since the 6 Days War has American Jewry done so much for Israel. In a single month following the October 7th attack, American Jews raised over $1 billion for Israel's war effort, and many volunteered their time, resources, and connections on Israel's behalf. And American Jews, too, were reminded that despite their differences with Israelis, Israel will take them in and save them if anti-Semitism intensifies further and threatens them in America as it does in France and England. Then again, you might say correctly that the lessons that Jews learn during anti-Semitic attacks, they forget as soon as the attacks subside. And this is the lesson of history. And nowhere is this more evident in Israel, but it's also, of course, evident in Europe and also here. However, when this burst of anti-Semitism subsides, and maybe the sense of family and sense of insecurity subsides as well, the demographic trends within American Jewry will persist. And these trends suggest that the sociological, cultural, political, and religious differences and friction points between Israeli and American Jews will subside in the next generation or two. Because demographers expect that by the end of this century, the share of the Orthodox community in American Jewry will triple due to its high birth rates and low intermarriage rates, and due to non-Orthodox Jews' low birth rates and high intermarriage rates. This means that by the end of the century, the American Jewish community will become more like other Jewish diasporas. It'll be smaller in size, but it will be younger and with a stronger Jewish identity, a more functional Jewish community, and a deeper connection to the Jewish religion, Jewish education, to Hebrew, and to the Jewish state. So in, let's say, 2 generations, American Jewry will look more like French or English or Australian Jewry, all of which have a much stronger Orthodox base and therefore do not exhibit the ambivalence and discomfort that American Jews display regarding Israel. American Jews won't have the problems that they now have with Israel's Jewish nationalism or with the role religion plays in Israeli society, nor with the rightward tilt of Israeli politics, and or with the fact that Israel doesn't respect Reform Judaism, because American Jewry itself will have a much stronger Orthodox base demographically, culturally, and politically. Now, to many of you, that might sound like a nightmare, like a red letter warning that American Jews will become religious zealots as non-Orthodox Jews. But if you travel to France or England or Australia or South Africa or Israel, you'll see that that is not what you see in those communities. Because before the rise of Reform Judaism, about 200 years ago, Orthodoxy in Europe and in the Middle East included Jews who were devout and meticulously observant, Jews who were less devout and less observant, Jews who were mildly observant, and Jews who were hardly observant, or just occasionally observant. Okay. This is what Orthodox Judaism looked like before the birth of the Reform movement. And that's what Orthodox Judaism still looks like today in Israel and in France, which is the second largest Jewish diaspora, and in England. Okay. So perhaps this is the future of Judaism in the United States as well, which means that the fear that these two tribes in Israel and America will drift completely apart or won't care about one another or feud with one another forever, I think might be overwrought. It's true that over the past generation, American Jews have been undergoing an identity crisis, which introduced some tensions, some questions, and some hurt feelings into this relationship. But it's just one generation. Identity crises don't last forever. The relations between American Jews and Israel were healthy, warm, respectful, affectionate, and supportive for the first 40 years of Israel's existence. There's good reason to assume that that is the normal state of affairs, just like in those other Jewish diasporas, and that this will resume once American Jews figure out their relationship with Judaism. Thank you. I see that there are questions already. Let me just click on the chat. So actually, let me just answer. I see a recurring question about the identity crisis. Let me just address this, but then I'll turn off the recording and we can carry on Q&A forever more loosely. But the identity crisis is a product of the revolution of Reform Judaism, Reform and its various tributaries, including conservative Judaism. The formulation of Judaism that's at the heart of the Reform movement is this admonition to be a man on the street and a Jew in your home. Okay, so just to be like normal people in public, as a citizen, and observe Judaism as you, to the degree that you want, in your own home in private. And it served Reform Jews very well in allowing them to become normal Germans, normal Frenchmen, normal Englishmen and Americans, and therefore to advance and gain great acceptance in these societies. But of course, there's a cost. It causes some confusion. Okay, if I'm a German in public, or if I'm an American in public and a Jew in private, then what am I? Am I German? Am I a German in my soul, or am I a Jew in my soul? Or what am I first? A German or a Jew? An American or a Jew? Okay. It's a meaningful question, and it's a necessary question. And it's a question that most non-Orthodox Jews answer subconsciously, prioritizing their identity as Americans over their identity as Jews. But here, let me just stop the recording and we can talk back and forth.